I mean, the world's biggest open secret is that the US Treasury doesn't exactly have 8,130 odd tons, which it states it has. How much it has, I really don't know. Before any gold standard could be contemplated, there would have to be an audit, a proper audit, an independent audit of US gold reserve. No, I don't think. I think all this talk about gold revaluation is premature. I really do. Apart from anything else, we all know. I mean, the world's biggest open secret is that the US Treasury doesn't exactly have 8,130 odd tons, which it states it has. How much it has, I really don't know. Before any gold standard could be contemplated, there would have to be an audit, a proper audit, an independent audit of US gold reserves. I don't see that happening. The other thing is that the system, both the Treasury and also the Fed, don't understand basic economics. They don't understand why money, corporeal money in the form of gold, is so important. It anchors the value of credit. They don't understand this at all. They're macroeconomists. They're not classical economists who, over centuries, work things out. That was all discarded by Keynes in 1936 in favor of governments manipulating our lives. So we're talking about climbing down completely from that sort of situation where governments actually have an awful lot of discretion as to what they can do with their currencies. I just don't see it. I mean, it's people who think that this is going to happen, I think, are people who fundamentally believe that things are under control of the government and government can just turn around and do things slightly differently. That's not the case. They really cannot. I mean, in this country, we've got a highly socialist government, and we saw not so long ago the Chancellor of the Exchequer, our finance minister, sobbing in Parliament over her predicament. And this is not a personal matter, which was sort of meant to be part of the story. I mean, the fact of the matter is that her Treasury officials will have told her that her first budget was an absolute disaster. They probably advised her against doing it, but as a union member, as a far left socialist, all this sort of schoolboy socialism type stuff, which these people have fed on, and haven't been able. I mean, they haven't been able to sort of pursue these fancies. She pursued these fancies and basically screwed everything up. So what happens? They found, you find that the cabinet then has to try and come up with welfare cuts, and surprise, surprise, the parliamentary party, whose members are all elected to protect welfare payments and enhance them, refuse to go along with it. So the whole thing is just, a complete and utter mess. And the idea that with that sort of commitment to welfare states, that we can turn round on a dime and introduce new gold standards, forget it. It's not going to happen. Crisis first, solution second. We have to really have a major, major crisis, collapsing the currencies before everybody's minds are focused enough to accept a solution. That solution would be a lot more radical than most people think. If they were to refix the dollar to gold at that sort of level, I think two things immediately occur to mind. First of all, would I be able to exchange gold for, my dollars for gold? The answer is probably not. The second thing is, we're talking about something like a 1,000% inflation kick on prices, all in one go. And I just can't see, basically you're saying that this is a deliberate act to destroy the economy. I mean, it's actually as simple as that, and I just don't see it. I can see them trying to put off the inevitable forever and ever and ever until finally they can't. But I think this sort of concept, And you see, the other thing is the first thing. Let's say the first step. Right, we'll audit the Fed. Okay, that's fine. Immediately, you'll have all the other countries who have stored gold with the Federal Reserve Bank of New York saying, "Hey, how about us? Can we come and look at our gold?" You turn around and tell the Germans that they weren't allowed to inspect their property back in, what was it, 2012 or 13 or so. You're opening a can of worms as soon as you start talking about gold. This is the problem. And it's always for this reason that anyone who's gone into the Treasury, who was a gold bug or whatever before, going back to Alan Greenspan, the first lesson they learn is do not talk about gold. No comment. It's not on the agenda. For whatever reason. I suspect, and I think you probably suspect, Andy, that so much gold has disappeared from US Treasury vaults over the years. We're talking about 54 years of suppressing gold, trying to persuade everybody that it is no longer money. It's a pet rock. This is a very, very big hole, if you like, in national reserves, and nobody could possibly admit to it. So I'm not convinced. I just don't see it. And a deliberate act of hyperinflation. No, I think hyperinflation by accident, yes, but not something that is going to deliberately do it. Oh, and another third point, and I'll just leave it at that. We know that Russia and China have got more gold than anybody else, like huge quantities. This would enrich them hugely. I just don't see it. Yeah, okay, well, the basic background is it's not so much gold and silver rising. Well, silver may be, but it's not so much gold rising as the dollar and fiat currencies losing purchasing power at an accelerated rate. So that's the background to it. So the idea that this sort of gold bull market is a bull market is actually misunderstanding the whole thing. What we're looking at is a bear market in dollars. And as we go into recession, we've already been in recession for about the last 2 years. If you take the budget deficit out of GDP, you can see pretty much how much GDP is coming out of the private sector. And the answer is a negative figure. So on that basis, you can see that there is absolutely no doubt that dollar is going down, and this will be reflected in far higher gold prices over time. You look at the technical chart, and it just confirms that, etc. So what actually we're talking about? We're talking about the death of the fiat currency system. That is dying. It's as simple as that. It's been running for 54 years. It's now coming to an end. And it's coming to an end because it's just created so much unproductive debt that all our economies, from governments and into private sectors, are just overloaded with this debt. They can go no further. We are sinking in a sea of debt. That is the other side of the credit bubble. For every debt, there is a credit. The credit bubble is it's the biggest one we've seen in history. It's far bigger than 1929. So we have this problem that when you get the death of the of fiat currencies, other things die with it. And obviously, one of the things that dies with it are the stupendously large derivative markets, because we're moving into a situation where, the idea of derivatives is you use them to hedge risk. But we now have a problem that the participants in that market are themselves greater in terms of risk than the risks which we use derivatives to hedge. We just don't want these counterparties. And that is an increasing problem. And we can see this with, in the case of gold, what happened earlier this year? Well, the Bank of England suddenly was shipping gold out, or, people who were storing gold in the Bank of England were shipping it out. There was a queue around the block to try and get it out. And the Bank of England was saying, it's going to take 6 weeks, whatever. The fact of the matter is that the Bank of England does store some gold for commercial entities, but the vast majority of the gold it stores is actually on behalf of central banks. And those central banks defray the cost of storage by leasing it. Now, under a lease contract, ownership passes under the terms of the lease entirely to the other party. So if you've leased gold, which is sitting in the Bank of England, and the Bank of England has long been saying, well, don't worry, this is just a book entry. It just goes across to Charlie, who wants to borrow your gold. And at the end of next year or whenever the lease expires, we'll do a contra entry, and so it won't leave the vault. But it's left the vault. What this is doing is it's making central banks very wary of leasing gold. I mean, it's just quite obviously, it's the most stupid thing a central bank can now do. What do? They withdraw from the leasing market. And as those leases fall due, they're not being renewed. And I suspect in quite a lot of the cases, the gold is not being returned because it just simply is nowhere to be found. So under these circumstances, what we have is the shortage of physical beginning to impact on liquidity in the derivative markets. And we can see this on COMEX with open interest in the gold contract. Despite gold rising into new high ground and, doubling in whatever in the last year or 18 months, you'd think open interest would be 600,000 contracts or something. No, it's sort of only just above the oversold levels. I mean, basically, the squeeze has been on the system. And the same is true in silver. Particularly in the last week or two, we've seen open interest in the silver contract fall while the price shoots up. What's that if it's not a bear squeeze? We've got it in platinum group metals. It turns out that both America and China have been stockpiling platinum. How much is there left in the market? Zippo, nothing. There's nothing in London at all. No liquidity. Obviously, there are people who own platinum, probably commercial entities, who store it in London vaults. But this isn't liquidity available to the people who make, sort of deal forward contracts and all the rest of it. So this is what's happening. And the other thing I've discovered is that if you look at the values of base metals, they have been left way behind with all the dilution of purchasing power of fiat currencies. If you measure it in gold, a basket of these, and it was a basket that was actually put together by the IMF some time ago. That basket, from the year 1900, when you could sort of index it against gold at that stage, the 1900 price today measured in gold is in the region of 20%. The value is fallen to 20% of where it was measured in gold. In other words, there's a huge, great catch-up in basic metal prices. What's that going to do to the derivative markets? Oil, I think, is another one. Oil is incredibly volatile, certainly in the front end, but I have no doubt that energy is going to become increasingly important as we approach the winter. We've got food problems and all the rest of it. The food prices are rising. This is something which isn't much talked about, but here we are in the summer months in the Northern Hemisphere. Food prices should be falling because we've got harvests and things like that, but they're not. They're going up. So, the whole of construction of trying to create artificial supply and suppress prices, which was really something that was invented in the 80s after Volcker raised interest rates to kill the gold market. That is now unwinding. The whole of fiat currency system is unwinding. And that is the fundamental fact behind what's going on in derivative markets.